I would like to welcome you once again on Angular Academy show number 3 and this season. Today we are going to talk about advanced TypeScript feature with awesome guest. We are all over the world right now because Craig is from New Zealand, as far as I remember, right? Right now.
Right. The country that's cut off the map in the picture behind you.
Yeah, are you still on the map, huh? Well, actually, yes, it's very early, right? 6 a.m., something like that.
7:30, not too bad, but yeah.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. And Uri is currently, I guess, in Tel Aviv.
That's correct. Tel Aviv, Israel. We just had the Angular up and a lot of amazing community members came to visit us here in Tel Aviv. Yes.
Yeah, Angular Up is an awesome conference. I had a chance to be there last year. Actually, it's the place where we met Uri right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, last year on a camel.
Yeah, on a camel, exactly, when the Canet was beaten by a camel and then...
We don't talk about it.
Oh, really?
No, that's fine, that's fine.
Yeah, that was a story. Did anything happen actually dangerous or worth mentioning this year? But you told me that you haven't had a chance to attend the trip this year.
Right. I heard they enjoyed it really. They had a lot of fun. The only dangerous thing I think that happened was during my live coding, where I had a really stupid mistake. But fortunately, somebody from the audience spotted it, so he saved our souls.
Yeah.
I saw Rob got sunburned as well.
I mean, every time. I remember once I was watching somebody on, I don't know, it was maybe a recording or the live conference talk. The guy said, you know, let the demo gods be with me, like not to have the demo effect. And it always happens that something is not working on the live demo, right? So you need demo gods to be with you.
I pray to them every single morning.
Yes, yes.
So may the demo gods be with us today. Yeah.
So before we start, just a short maybe introduction to our audience. So let me start with Uri. Tell us, what do you do so awesome? I know you do for Angular community here in this amazing Angular world.
Thanks. So I do a lot of open source, and I'm lucky to be able to go to many conferences and meet all the smart people that work on awesome stuff and also have a lot of fun there. So this is actually how Craig and I met. We were both attending NGConf 2 months ago. And after NGConf, we found ourselves flying on a plane to Vegas. Unfortunately, I caught some virus, so I couldn't go out. I mean, I was 3 or 4 days in Vegas and only went out twice. But this also gave me some time while trying to recover to get to know Craig and the other people I was hanging out with better. And we started speaking, and we found that we are both very interested in how we can make TypeScript tooling more awesome, because we both love TypeScript. And I personally think TypeScript is one of the best things happened to frontend in the last few years. And I also think this whole ecosystem is still in infancy. There is so much we can do to make our lives as developers so much more fun, so much easier. What about yourself, Craig?
Yeah, I'm Craig. I'm from New Zealand, so I apologize for the accent. I work down here at a company called TradeMe, kind of like eBay or Amazon or something like that. But we're New Zealand's one of the biggest websites down here, and we build a pretty big Angular app. And so my company supports me to go to things like NGConf, or I spoke at JSConf AU earlier in the year about ASTs as well. And yeah, kind of the same thing. I got into a bunch of code manipulation stuff with JavaScript. And then when we moved on to, TypeScript, I was kind of frustrated that we didn't have the same kind of tools available there. So I was like, okay, what have we got here from that world that we can translate over, and then push that out to the community and see what they can do. So yeah, it's pretty good. And kind of NGConf was great. New Zealand's a long way away, so it's kind of hard to get to these things. So I'm hoping to get to some more things in the future.
Cool. So when it comes to me, I also fell in love in TypeScript, especially that I originated from a Java world. I was building enterprise apps in Java, so this world of strong typing and everything that gives you this way of working, comparing to JavaScript, the old JavaScript without TypeScript, actually made me really interested in that. That's why everything. That's why we are here, because Angular Academy show is like a side project out of Angular Academy, which is initiative that helps people and companies to get up to speed with Angular. I host trainings, workshops, and also personally, I also had a chance to speak at cool conferences across the world. One of them was Angular App, when I met Uri, NG Vikings, and so on. So actually, we cross our paths very often when it comes to traveling and meeting on the conferences, right? So that's a cool part. That's a cool part of being active in a community, right?
I would love to know if any of the audience right now in the chat have been to one of those conferences. If you did just write in the chat, I would love to see how.
Yeah, Angular App, NG Vikings, JSConf, any other. Maybe any other interesting conferences that we should actually take a closer look at.
React Europe, for example.
What is React? What is React? I don't know that framework.
Oh, it's on NPM. They have
really? There's probably some cool
700,000 packages on NPM, and one of them is React. You should check it out.
Really?
Only one?
Yeah, maybe I okay. So after this meeting, I will have a closer look on React, and I heard that that may be beneficial for me. Cool, guys. So how do we start this talk? This is the talk about AST and refactoring. I know that Uri, you have something cool to show at the beginning.
Yes, right. Actually, right now, let me share my screen while doing it, because it will take a few moments. I should have done it before, but this will be a good way to test my screen sharing. I'm creating a new Angular project with the CLI. So let's see if you can see what I see. Just a moment. I will close a few embarrassing windows. Before we get started, before I share my screen, I always have this anxiety that somebody will send me a message or something while I'm doing a demo. All right, so what we are going to see right now is npm install, I guess, running, but it's still running. I should use yarn, it's probably faster. So do you see my desktop npm installing?
Yes.
Yes, perfect. Yeah, it will take a moment or two. So let me go to what I did here. Basically created a new project called Angular Academy with a ---- writing, which also configures the Angular router module for me. So what we are going to do right now, we are just going to, so this is the basic Angular CLI project. It's going to have this okay, these are spoilers for later. It's going to have this welcome to Angular whatever screen. And what I'm going to show you is a few new commands in the Angular CLI. If you haven't been following in the last few months, you probably didn't even hear about them. And these commands do some really cool things when it comes to creating something nice real quick. I hope Npm Install finishes soon. It's deprecated. I think I should have prayed more to Gods of Live demos today. Anyway, so if you don't use Yarn, then maybe you should check it out. It works a little bit faster from NPMs at times. Even though I heard the newest NPM, NPM 6, is now working faster. And I think we are about to finish. Yes. So let's get into the Angular Academy, whatever. And I opened Visual Studio Code. We have a new project. Here we go. Let's run ngserve to see that it's actually working. This will also take a couple of seconds. And as soon as we get this project running, I will open it. You will see the Hello World page of Angular. I guess most of you should be familiar with it if you have ever used the CLI. So yeah, this is our basic application. And what I'm going to do now is run a few CLI commands to make this application look more impressive. So the first thing we are going to do is ng-add Angular material. And obviously that is going to install more stuff, but I hope this time it will be faster. And it is going to do a few changes in our project, as you will see in a moment. And basically installing material design library into our app.
So ng-add was actually added to Angular version 6, right?
Yes,
CLI.
I think, yeah, I think it's like new CLI. Oh, sorry, they have a bug. I should install the previous version. I forgot about it. So they released a new version last week, and it has a problem where it doesn't work with ng-add. I hope they will fix it soon. But in the meanwhile, we just have to install the previous version 6.1, and after we finish that, we are going to run the server again. And you can see it basically added this new package, updated our app module and other files to, you can see the list of modifiers files on the left. So it basically imports all the browser animation module that is required by material. So basically, these are steps that with previous versions of Angular, we had to do ourselves. But right now, ng-add does all of these things for us. And basically, I'm running ngserve again. I'm not going to refresh the app because we are going to see the same page. We haven't changed the app. But here comes the interesting part. I'm actually going to run another command, ng-generate Angular material, and tell it to generate a material navigation. Let's give it a name called appnav. And this is a new command that scaffolds a new Angular component, that has a lot of things already built into it. And as you can see, when I ran this command, it added all those imports to my app module. These are all the components that are used by this scaffold. So let's see what this scaffold looks like. What we are going to do right now is remove all this welcome to my app stuff that was generated by the CLI and replace it with this appnav that we just generated. And I'm going to reload, and voila, this is what we got. So we got a basic material design navigation component just by running this ng-generate command. And to take it to the next level, we are going to run it 2 more times. This time we'll generate a dashboard, same command, just with the word dashboard. And I'm also going to move the router outlet to this component. So this is the nav component it generated. Let's put here the router outlet. So it will put whatever page we have in our router, the active page. It will put it in the middle of this appnav. And let's also change it to say Angular Academy Show Live Demo as the title. So we can see we have this title. And the last thing I want to do here is to update our routes. So we'll have a new route with an empty path, and we'll say the component will be a new component we just generated, which is the app dashboard. So this is what we generated with the command line tool of Angular. And here we go. We have this nice dashboard. And to finish this short demo, we are going to do the same with a table. We are going to generate a material table. So this will add a few more imports to the scaffold. And we see TSLint doesn't like this because the line is too long, but we don't care right now. And we are going to update the routing as well and add a new route. Say, let's say, call it table, and say component will be app table component, the one that was just created by this scaffolding command. And one thing we also need to do, we need to update the links we have in the nav. So let's create the first one will go to the dashboard, and the second one will go to the table. And then we can use the router link to dashboard will be at slash. And then the other one will be slash table equal slash table. And basically that's it for the demo. We created a small app with a table and a dashboard, and we have all this call functionality just created by the scaffold. We can sort here. There is a pagination built into it. And I think the thing I like the best about this is that we can just switch to mobile mode. And then the menu is like, you know, it has this behavior where it goes on top instead of being present all the time. And as you can see, this design is totally responsive. So
yeah, by the way, Angular Material is really doing, the team is doing a really great job. I love that project from the very beginning. I remember back then, for example, a year ago, I mean, not all the components that were in the pipeline were ready yet. They had like a very, I mean, it was very slow adoption, but right now the components that are appearing, and it's getting mature and mature more, right?
Totally. Like, if I had to do this demo 1 year ago, we had to spend the whole talk just, you know, pulling things together and creating it step by step. But right now, I mean, you can see I started with the ng add Angular, and then I had to do 3 or 4 more commands and basically do like 3 or 4 modifications in the files. And we got all these changes, all these files created and updated for us, so we could install material, use the right components, import everything that we need, and create this nice app. And this is just the beginning. They are adding a few more generators. I think in the next version, they are going to have one that will generate a form with input fields for you automatically. So you don't have to remember all those recipes for creating your UI. You just say, I want a table, and you get a table which looks pretty nice. You want a dashboard, you want a nav. And I hope this will be down the road how we create applications. We don't have to go to the computation and copy paste codes. We just need to either write a CLI command, or there will probably be a VS Code plugin. I think there is already one called Angular Doc, which allows you to do this stuff, but with menus from VS Code instead of from command line.
A short drop in. We have a question from the audience. I didn't mention from the beginning that if anybody have a question, there is a special button, Q&A. You just please use this Q&A functionality so that we can track every question to be answered, not to get lost. So, but right now, the question is, where can we find list of all available generators? I mean, you can, first of all, you can build your own generator. It's not a big deal. It's called Schematics. You need to pull it into the either Angular CLI, or you can use it independently. But the beauty of it is it's like an open source, like everybody can write your own generator. Angular CLI has a bunch of built-in generators, and to be honest, I don't remember the command to show up all possible generators, but if you just do ng-help, you can follow the manual for Angular CLI and to find what can be actually generated. Exactly, ng-generate -- help gives you the list of the generators.
Right, and I also posted a link to the material design documentation website where they explain about their own generators, like the navigation, the dashboard, and the table that I just showed you. And yeah, as Bartosz just mentioned, this all behind the scenes is a new tool from the Angular CLI team that is called Schematic. So Schematics is pretty awesome, and it's pretty amazing piece of technology that basically allows you to write code that writes code or modifies code. And all the Angular CLI right now is built on top of Schematics. So perhaps, Craig, do you want to take it and explain in a few words what Schematics is?
Yeah, so the kind of underlying idea of a schematic is that you have a set of files that you want to create and you want to manipulate in a way, and they're represented by a tree. And so you have this tree of files, and at any point in time, you can kind of create a new file, whether it's like a new piece of HTML or a new piece of TypeScript, and you can also modify that file. So you can, you know, insert a different name here or a different bit of text there, and you can kind of pass them as options to that schematic. And then when the code runs, it kind of builds out these files for you. And the really nice thing about it is you can, A, you can create your own, B, you can compose them. So for example, we have some custom ones here at my work where we use the actual Angular CLI schematics and combine them with the NGRX schematics, and then make our own little tweaks, and then we combine them all together and make whole feature schematics. So with, you know, one line at the terminal, you can build out almost a whole new feature of an app. But
Exactly.
under the hood,
as you said, you can extend, and this is also a very crucial part, that you can take existing schematics and you can say, I want to extend it, right? So imagine that you would like to build a company-wide ng-CLI that implements your own style guides, implements the way you architecture your app. So the way you do this, you just take the existing schematics, and on the top of that, you build your own thing that whenever there is an update whenever there's an update in ng-CLI, you still are extending the same CLI schematics. So that's also a powerful use case, I believe.
Absolutely. And the really crucial bit about that is if you write your transforms and your schematics in a way that is like just based on the text. So if you're just like moving around characters, you can come into problems, because if they add like a new import at the top of your file,
exactly,
and you've done it based on like the position in the file, stuff starts to break. And that's why the AST starts to become pretty important. So maybe let's talk a bit about that now, or?
Yeah, I mean, it would be great if you can elaborate on that, because this is the very foundation of how this AST stuff is working. Because, you know, if we think about the generators that are based on the position of the characters, and if somebody makes a space, things start to break, right?
Right, totally.
So you said generators and AST, and I'm not sure if all of our audience is actually familiar with AST. So perhaps we should reveal now that the topic of today's webinar is AST. And I think Craig summarized it in a really good way when I asked him, what do we want people to take away from our conversation today? So what was that, Craig?
I guess the thing we want to explain to people is that they're not scary. You know, it's this abstract syntax tree. If that's what AST stands for, if you don't know that, abstract syntax tree. It doesn't make much sense. I don't like the first time I saw it, I didn't really understand any of those words. But I think we want to really express today that you don't necessarily need to know what that stuff means. We have some tools that can make them really useful for you in your own day-to-day work, and actually really understandable as well. So for me personally, I did an engineering degree. It didn't have a heap of computer science in it. I never did this stuff at school. And then I kind of got into the real world and I wanted to manipulate some code, and I started seeing this stuff online, and it was really scary, and that made me want to make it better. And so that's That's what a bunch of this stuff's about.
So to wrap it up, I mean, we need to. I mean, we want to explain this concept about ASTs that is heavily used as a foundation for example, schematics, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
Basically,
not just schematics.
Yeah, not just we started out from schematics, but the use cases are like more general. I mean, there could be other things built on the top of that concept, right?
Totally. Like, if you think about, if you've ever used TS-lint or anything like that, you know, that's all AST inspections. If you've used like Webpack or anything, when they're like making your bundles, they're doing it all via the AST. Everything is basically using this stuff, and it's kind of good to know how it works.
Yeah, basically every piece of tooling that works with source code, generates source code, does anything with source code, should be written using AST. I have seen some smaller libraries that try to get away with using regular expressions. There is a good Stack Overflow answer about that. Let me share my screen. I love this. So some guy asked how it parses HTML using regular expressions, and then he got the following answer, which basically says that regex parsers for HTML will instantly transport a programmer's consciences into a world of ceaseless screaming. Becomes the blah, 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 blah. I can't even read it anymore. It gets really messy. So yeah, I will post the link in the chat if you want to.
Yeah, like a very long, very long answer, and very upvoted. I can see also.
Yes. It's more of a poetry than an answer. Anyway, I will post the link, but yes, I just pasted it. I pasted the link to the question. I think it's the first or second answer there. And yeah, basically you can get away with regular expressions, but there are probably so many cases that you wouldn't cover. Like even we'll show you later a few examples of stuff that would be hard to craft with regular expressions or impossible, but super trivial with abstract syntax trees. But I think to start, so what are abstract syntax trees? What are ASTs? Craig, can you explain it to me, please?
All right. So the way that I like to think about these trees is that most of it doesn't matter, but it's a way of representing source code. So source code in any language, it doesn't have to be TypeScript or JavaScript, it's just source code. But it's a way in representing that code that doesn't actually talk about the characters and the letters you've typed in your source code. So you talk about things like a call expression, you know, the idea of calling a function, or an identifier, like the idea of giving something a name. And that's where the abstract bit comes from. It's like not actually kind of about the characters that you've typed into your code, but about the ideas that build up that stuff. And so the really cool thing is if you have an AST, you can generate a bunch of different languages from that thing. And so that's actually, you know, how we transpile from TypeScript to JavaScript is we go, okay, give me this TypeScript, I'll get this AST, and then most of the concepts in the AST directly map to a concept in JavaScript. And so you can just generate JavaScript from this intermediate tree structure that doesn't know about either language. And that's kind of why it's abstract. For the syntax part, again, it's kind of you're just talking about structures of the language rather than like the individual tokens or like true or false statements or return statements or anything like that. And then the tree part is that technically they're not meant to have cycles in them. So that's a thing from like graph theory, but sometimes that isn't true as well.
Code is always full of surprises. Actually, you mentioned multiple languages, and one of my friends has just created a tool that could convert enumerations, enums, from one language to another. So basically, he reads the enum into AST of whatever language, then he parses out the values from the AST, and he would serialize this AST into a different language. So you could convert between Java and JavaScript and Python and PHP, whatever. And it doesn't have to think about the syntax or anything thanks to this concept of ASD. And this is also a good opportunity to give another good friend of mine a shout out, Jonathan Mavora, who actually introduced me to the concept of ASD. And we have a question I see, so let's answer it. And then I want to show you what my first tip at working with ASD was like, and how it is so much better nowadays. But first of all, somebody asked us if what we think about schematics, if it will be used widely in the Angular ecosystem, and if it's worth investing time in learning it. So Craig, what do you say?
I say absolutely. We can already see the stuff that is coming out through the CLI. I don't know if you saw, we haven't talked about it yet, but there's a thing called ng upgrade. And ng upgrade is another thing that uses schematics that almost entirely for free upgraded from Angular 5 to Angular 6 or whatever in the future, 7, 8.
Yeah, ng update in the CLI command. I use it so many times. Yeah, it's just like magic. Just move things around and voila, Angular 6.
And then so within individual companies, that composability of them, people are going to be making their own schematics and making actual day-to-day dev work really fast. And that'll just build on top of what we get from the community. And so I think absolutely worth understanding them. Go write one yourself. The docs aren't great. Reach out to either Yuri or myself. We'll try to help you if you have a go and you can't and you get stuck. But have a go at writing one. There's some weird concepts in there, but you'll get your head around them, and then they're really powerful. I think everyone should give it a go.
Yeah, I would just point out that the thing that we talked about a couple of minutes before, that you can plug in different schematics and extend them. Actually, this is not just out of blue. I did it at my current client job. So the requirement actually was to build a foundation for the future apps that has the architecture that we want to follow, the way we would like to style the application. So I was thinking about, okay, so I can have yet another seed. And then everybody would be checking out the seed, and then this seed, whenever there is a new version of Angular, would require maintenance. And here I thought, if, as you said, I remember you thought something like that if somebody changes the initial seed generated by ngCLI, because this is how people start new projects, and I would need to adapt it to the new generated seed. And then I was thinking, okay, I don't want to do that. I just want to build on the top of that something that would actually take existing Angular seed, the initial seed application, and just plug in the things that I wanted to build on top of that. So if I generate a module that requires me to add every time some boilerplate, that either way I would be doing, and I can have a schematics. So the only problem was that the time I was building it, the docs were not very well maintained. If we can talk about any docs yet, there is a problem. The only problem is like a documentation. Investing it is for sure worth doing it, but the problem is that if you don't understand how things work yet, you could find a problem. But I hope that we can help you somehow during this webinar.
Right. One of the reasons we are here is to give you one thing that will help you build your schematics and build them the right way. So this is not a webinar about schematics specifically. As we mentioned, schematics is one use case to what we are going to show. But I think, Bartek, this is a good idea. Perhaps we can have another Angular Academy show in a few weeks about schematics, just about how you build your own schematics. That would be super useful.
Carol writes, I think they've introduced schematic in version 4, but without any docs. They have added some in version 5, and now they are promoting schematics in version 6 as fully stable and working and sparkling and everything. Yes, I would just put a side note. I'm not sure, but maybe guys correct me if I'm wrong. The idea of schematics came out that the guys behind CLI found out that the tools that they have built to build CLI may be more generic, and they started to pull it out as a separate project. Schematics. I mean, this is, I'm not sure, I don't know how they were going this path, but this looks like this for me. I mean, hey, we are building a CLI for Angular, but the underlying like specific implementation, or maybe the concept that we have under the hood, let's make it a separate project, Schematics, and then somebody else can use it, and we can build other things on the top of that. What do you think about this concept? Is my deduction right?
I think so. Anyway, let's get back to the subject of AST. I want to say something before I show you the next thing, which is, I am sorry. This is how I was introduced to AST, which is kind of scary. So don't be scared, just hold for a moment while I share my screen and show you an amazing tool called the ASD Explorer. So if you see now, on the left, this is a small TypeScript program. This is ASD Explorer. It's open, available for free. Explorer, ASDExplorer.net, a great tool, open source. You can use it with many languages, not just JavaScript and TypeScript. You can use it with CSS, GraphQL, HTML, SQL, Scala, whatever. But as you can see, so this code on the left is actually generating this enormous JSON structure on the right. And this is kind of too verbose and scary. And for the first time when I saw it, I was like, wow, there is so much information here. I just felt like I was drowning in the amount of information that you have there. So for that reason, I created a simplified version of ASD Explorer that does away with all this information, like position of where stuff starts and ends, and all these numbers. And it shows you just the essence. So this is the TS-Query playground, and we'll tell you about TS-Query in a moment, but let's just appreciate the simplicity here. So we have the same program, console log hello world, and this is the AST on the right. And this is what I want you to remember as the AST, which is this very simple tree. And let's see how this program maps to the AST. So first of all, you can see this hello world is actually a string literal. So this is a string. And it doesn't really matter if I write the string as hello world or if I use double quotes, it will still be a string literal. And that's the thing about it being abstract. It doesn't matter. And then I have this call expression. So this entire program is actually one line, one expression, and this is a call expression. So I'm calling a function. And you can see this call expression has two children, this string literal that we have just saw, the hello world, and a property access expression, which is basically us accessing the property log of the identifier console. So we have two identifiers, console and log. We are accessing the log identifier of the console object, and then we are using the result and calling it with this string literal. And again, this is abstract. So if I had to parse it with a regular expression, I would probably have to account for stuff like this, which, as you can see, doesn't really change the AST. And like I could put some comments here, multi-line comments, and I'm pretty sure I could even go more creative with adding even more stuff here that would make it super hard to parse with regular expression, like I could put here a lot of more dots and whatever. But since this is just the abstract representation, I still get the same result, no matter how I try to change my code, as long as the syntax is valid. Actually, I'm not sure if, no, this doesn't work in JavaScript, never mind. So basically, this is the hello world of the AST. how this statement, this console log hello world, breaks down into AST. And I want you to think for a second, what would happen if I take this string and replace it with a number? Let's say the number 42. So yeah, this time the AST has changed because I've changed the meaning of the code. Now it's no longer a string literal, it's a numeric literal because we have a number there. And again, it doesn't matter if it would be hexadecimal or if it would be octal or if it would be a floating point. The AST representation will still stay the same. It's still a numeric literal. So that's basically what the AST is all about. And this is one way to represent the AST that is pretty simple. There is also this way, which contains a lot more information. So if we check out the string literal, we can also see the text and all sort of stuff like which comments appear before it, or yeah, you can now see that it has this trailing comments element. But for the most part, we don't really need this information. We can just start with this simple representation. So if we have any questions about this, you can share with us in the chat. Otherwise, Greg, I would love to hear from you about the tooling you created for the AST and why it is important.
Yeah, so I kind of mentioned a little earlier that I was doing a bunch of JavaScript kind of code manipulation stuff. And one of the things that I found in that ecosystem is a tool called ES-Query. It's actually part of a suite of tools that are called the ES tools, and they're all based around this particular implementation of AST, which is the Mozilla Firefox AST, the one they use internally. But ES-Query is a really simple idea. You take the AST of your code and you basically apply a CSS selector to it. So let me see if I can share my screen as well.
Please. And I also pasted a link to ES-Query to the chat in case that you want to check it out.
Can we see? Yeah, cool. So this is ES-Query. Code for it is all on GitHub, obviously, and they have this whole list of selectors. So you can do, you know,
looks like CSS.
Looks like CSS, exactly. So you have these like nth child selectors, or you know, adjacent selectors, or all these kind of things that we're pretty familiar with, and it kind of makes sense, right? Because the tree that we are using with our AST is very similar to like the tree structure that you get from HTML. And so it's
like
a pretty exactly like a DOM. It's just in the tree. And so the mapping is pretty understandable and pretty straightforward. And so I decided we need this thing in the TypeScript world. And so we ended up with this TS query. And so it's exactly the same idea, but instead of using the Mozilla Firefox AST under the hood, we're using the TypeScript AST.
So great. Just, I want you to be honest with me. Just scroll down a little. Scroll down, please. And tell me, did you copy paste it from the ES-Query documentation?
Yes.
Okay.
Word for word. I think I deleted a couple, but yeah, pretty much word for word.
Well, that's what we do as programmers. We copy paste from Stack Overflow. So welcome to the club.
I've even got the link to their old demo because it's still pretty good.
It is good.
I just wanted to just have a short drop in, Craig. So as far as I understood, we could have a different implementation for this, different implementations for AST, right? So there's like a TypeScript implementation for AST, but nobody prevents me to build my own AST implementation for the TypeScript, right? So it will differ in the implementation details. How do I call this? I mean, Uri showed something like string literal, right? And then how do I call all the things in my tree in some abstract way, right? So you use the implementation of TypeScript in your project, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Like I've done one myself at this point now, and it's hard. Like you basically just end up looking at the words they use anyway. So it's pretty much just a lot more straightforward to just use one that's already there.
Okay,
Yeah,
and so,
actually,
yeah,
Bartosz,
go on, Henry.
to answer your question, let me share my screen again. I love this screen share, I think. So back to Asd Explorer, and you can see that we have JavaScript as the language, but there is a bunch of different AST implementations. There are even two different parsers for TypeScript, and then there are also Babylon, which belongs to Babel, and other implementations. And some of them, like Babylon, as far as I know, they can also read TypeScript. Even though their target language is JavaScript, they can also consume TypeScript as input. And if I switch to Babylon, you can see, or perhaps you won't be able to see because there are subtle differences. Like you can see it's called a member expression here.
Yeah, that was I was saying, that these are the implementation details that changes across different implementation of the same thing, right?
Right. So this is Babylon 7, the Babel AST, and it calls this a member expression and not how did we call it, their property access expression. So it's basically the same thing, but with a different name because the implementation is different. But you can see the tree looks pretty much the same. We have a program instead of a source file. Then we have an expression statement, which we also have here. Then we have a call expression, member expression, which here is called property access. And then we have those two identifiers and a string literal, just as we had in the TypeScript one. The only, okay, here it's numeric because I changed it. The only thing that differs is that TypeScript has this end of file token, which is not present here, but basically you can guess there is the end of file at the end of file. Yeah, I mean, so that was the question.
That's right now the aha moment when you think, aha, so that's how it works, right? How the TypeScript works, how the Babylon, like a Babel was implemented. I mean, we've been using it for a very long time, like TypeScript, or back then, like a Babel, which was a transpiler from ES6 to ES5.
Yeah, they call it 5 to 6, I think, before it was Babel. It had a different name. I think it was 5 to 6.
Oh, really? But the concept that was actually just build AST and transpile it to the different language. I mean, the same concept. I mean, right now I'm just thinking loudly. I mean, we can transpile it from any language, like to, I don't know, to Java, for example. I can write a Java AST and then transpile it to JavaScript. I mean, have you heard about the project GWT? I mean, is it somehow using this kind of stuff? I mean, because I know that GWT is Google Web Toolkit that allows Java developers write front end. I mean, I'm just curious, what do you think? Could it be using the same stuff under the hood?
Almost definitely.
Huh?
Yeah, I mean, we don't know for sure because we didn't want to look at their source code. I think it's that project now, but basically, yes, it's the only way that makes sense to do this kind of transformation. And this is what Babel does to implement new language features to polyfill them. And this is what TypeScript does and what CoffeeScript does. And there was even something called LiveScript at some point, which should obviously do the same. And I think this is a good point to explain the role of AST in this whole compiler landscape. So I don't remember too much from my computer science classes, but one thing I remember, there is like, for a compiler, you have two parts. You have this tokenizer, they also call it lexer, that takes your input file and just spits out a set of tokens. Like this is an opening quote, this is like a string, this is a closing quote, this is a keyword, whatever. And then you have another part, which is called the parser, that takes those tokens and build the AST from there. And once you have this AST, then you can do whatever transformations that you like to do changes. So whenever Babel implements kind of code transformation, when they run it, they first tokenize the file, then they parse it into an AST, and then all their transformations are working on top of the AST.
So first of all, we need a tokenizer that would read the particulars, like a characters from the source code. Then we need a parser that would build an AST, and then the fun begins. Like all the possibilities on the top of that can be made, right?
Right. And basically, this reminds me a fun story of a project I had like 1 year ago with the tokenizer of TypeScript as well as Node's tokenizer. I heard people in one of the conference, I think it was Jason in Switzerland, where they were just a hallway conversation where they were discussing, should we use semicolons or not? And then I asked myself, what if instead of semicolons, we had dragons? So I tried to change Node and TypeScript to accept dragons, like the emoji of dragon, as a valid semicolon character. So basically, I wrote this post. So let me share my screen. And you can now see this was this piece of code is actually a part of Node.js's tokenizer. So basically, this is, you can't really tell, but this is C code. It looks very much like JavaScript. The only thing that the only thing that you can use to distinguish this is this double columns here. But basically, the tokenizer is just a big switch case which says if I see a colon, then I emit this token. If I see a semicolon or a dragon emoji Unicode, I emit this semicolon. So basically, the tokenizer is super simple, and the parser is the part that then takes this list of tokens and creates the AST. And stuff like semicolons is handled at this level, like at the parser. So when you get the AST, you don't have to worry about stuff like semicolons. Are they there? Are they not? Are they dragons? You don't care, basically.
Cool. That good to point out this small devil details.
Yes. So I think that would be a good time to show a nice demo of TS query, like how it is useful in real life. So Craig, do you want to do this, or do you want me to go ahead and do it?
I can have a look. Let's let me just find it.
Yep.
So post on the screen again. Cool. So here we are back at our amazing TS query screen again, and we're gonna hone through to Yuri's playground. And so we're back in the same place as we were before, but now we've got a little bit more code. And you can actually see at the top here, if I get rid of that, got nothing happening. We've still got our AST as before, but it's a little bit more complicated. There's a few more things going on. We've still got our console log expression in here, as you can see, but we've also got these functions that are declared. We've got a variable declaration list. But at the top, we've got this input. And so this input is the thing that is based on, that is essentially taking in these CSS selectors from TS query, and it's going to apply them to that AST. So we'll start out with a real simple one. And if we do something like identifier, and you can see I've got some highlights in my code. And all of these tokens that I can see that I've got highlighted are the identifiers that are in my TypeScript in this case. And so it's pretty cool. You know, I can go through and say, okay, cool. Here are all my identifiers, but I want to know a little bit more about some of them perhaps. And so in TS query, you can add these attribute selectors, right? And so I want to know about all of the identifiers where the name is equal to console. Cool, and so now I've only got this one, which is really useful, right? I might want to do something with that. or I can go name as F, and suddenly I can see both of these. And so I could, infer some relationship from the two of those. But it's not just about, attributes. You can do slightly more complicated things. So I could go, show me a property access expression. What can I write that?
Expression.
There you go. So we've got a property accessor over here before, but I want to be really specific and say where there is a child of that, which is the little, descendant
identifier.
And so I've got all the children of that property access expression, whereas an identifier. And so let's do something else. And if we go foo.
That sounds like a cool starting point for refactoring.
Totally, exactly. You can
totally
find out some stuff, right? And I can have a few more of these.
I can smell refactoring in the air.
So I can add a couple more of these. And if I want to get more specific, then again, I can go, name equals console or something like that. And now I can only get one. You start building up these queries and you can, find really unique parts about your code and pull out tokens that you're interested in. So if you wanted to rename them all, for example, like we're saying, a nice refactor tool, you can build them up in this way. Or if you wanted to write a lint rule that said you're never allowed to use console log, you could do something like this and say, okay, I see you've used console log, we'll throw an error, that kind of stuff. So you can build your own linter with these tools as well.
Right, and then if you put like console, the word console inside the string, it won't find it. So yeah, basically it does what it should do. Like you get only the actual property access expression, only the actual thing where you access something inside a console object.
Exactly.
Yeah. So how much time do we have left, Bartek?
I mean, how much content or the cool stuff do we have left on your site, guys? I
have 2 more demos that I can do. 3 actually.
I mean, I think that we can go with them. Go with them. Unless Craig, are you, because it's already 7 a.m., right? What time do you start your office job?
We're at 8:30 now. I'm starting to get messages, but I think we're okay for a bit longer.
Yeah. Right. So what about, are you able to stay with us, Craig, for those demos?
I can stay for a bit longer.
Yeah, cool. Go on, Uri. Let's show off.
Yeah. So when Craig created TS query, I said, okay, this is cool. I can run complicated queries on my own projects. And as you mentioned before, Bartek, we can do refactorings. But wouldn't it be useful, really useful, if I could use this to search the entire GitHub source code, like everything open source on GitHub, all TypeScript files on GitHub? So I created another small tool, which is again based on TS query, and I called it Big TS query. And let me share my screen and show it to you. So this is basically, you can see another TS query engine where you can write selectors. And you can basically, so this selector, for example, will find all the function declarations that has export keywords, like all the exported functions, and their immediate identifier child, which would be the name of the function. So let's just run this in TS query.
Are you trying to tell me that you are going to look for whole GitHub?
Yep, and so yeah, we're going to do it in a moment. But first of all, we can see this, basically this function declaration has export keyword, matches the entire function declaration, but only if it has an export keyword, obviously, otherwise it doesn't match. But then if I add this identifier child, then it would only match the name of the function, which is the only identifier that lives right under the function declaration. So let's take this query, and we are now querying GitHub. It will obviously take some time, up to 30 seconds. And here we go. basically, this is a list of all functions exported on GitHub. And you can see it doesn't matter if it's written as export function, export default function, if it's inside a module or whatever, it still finds that function, even if it has a dollar and generic attributes or whatever in its name. And since we are in Angular podcast, we obviously want to learn about Vue. So let's use this preset, which just looks for all the classes that extend an identifier called Vue. So obviously, classes that extend Vue are Vue components. So when this query finishes running, we have a quite interesting collection of Vue components examples. And we can use this to learn about how to write Vue code. So you can see a few examples here. And let's say we wanted to learn not about Vue in general, but about the Vue router. So we can make this query more specific and ask for all the Vue components that has an identifier inside called router. These are Vue components that access the Vue router. And as soon as I'm going to run this query, I will find Vue components, but only the ones that use router. And then I can open this file on GitHub and learn how to use the router. Or in this case, I can also learn, in addition to how to use the router, I can also learn some Korean. I think this is Korean. So basically, this is a powerful tool for two reasons. First of all, we can use it to learn, to see how people write unit tests. So we can search for stuff we describe with an int function inside, or as we just did, to learn how people write Vue components and Korean. And then the other thing that makes this really useful is for framework authors, or even the TypeScript language team, the team that works on the TypeScript language. They can just look for specific language features like, I don't know, the any keyword or the key of keyword or any of the other newer language features, and see how many people use them in the wild and how they use them. So basically, yes, you can now use code queries and run them over GitHub. And without this TS query tool, it would not be possible to query for such things. Like, I could probably query for the string extends Vue, search it, but then I would find it in comments inside string. I would find stuff that is not necessarily classes, perhaps interfaces that I'm not interested in. And I wouldn't find it if they had a comment between the word extends and Vue, or if it, so basically, whenever we harness the AST for doing searches, we can be certain that we are getting what we actually want and not something else, or not missing anything. So this is one of the cool demos that I wanted to show you. And another demo.
I would like to ask, I mean, how
Sure.
how did you manage to actually make 1 million queries in such a short period of time?
Yeah, that's a good question. So actually, this tool is called Big TS Query, and it combines two tools, TS Query and another tool from Google Cloud Platform called BigQuery. So BigQuery is basically a SQL engine that allows you to run queries over massive datasets, and it has the entire GitHub dataset inside. And let me stop sharing my screen. And what I did here, I just combined BigQuery and managed to run TypeScript and TS query inside the BigQuery engine. So basically, we have this tool from Google running over the entire GitHub dataset and executing TS query on each of the files. And the ability to do it so quick is basically the fact that they run this in parallel. So they have a lot of computers that are part of the query. And whenever we execute a query, they just run it in parallel on a lot of computers. Just for a comparison, if I did this same thing on my computer, it would probably take between 10 to 20 minutes to run this query. So somebody asked, okay, so yeah, cool. So yeah, so this is one way ASTs could be useful. They could query GitHub, or they could just query your source code, as you mentioned, for refactoring. And actually, if you want, let's do another quick demo where what we are going to do, we are going to live code a quick tool to do code refactoring with TS query. Let me share my screen again, and I hope this one will go well. And anyway, it's going to be fun. So this is my desktop. I'm sharing my screen, and I will make a small tool that will replace console logs, because we really love console logs. We just focused about them into some service, some awesome logging service. So instead of, let's say you have a code base with a lot of console logs, instead of doing console logs all way long, it will just change all your console logs into an Angular service. So you can send them to the server or whatever. Let's call this console log refactor. Let's initialize a new project, this time with Yarn, so it goes a little bit faster. And in order to do stuff with the AST and TypeScript, I'm going to install TypeScript and TS query as dependencies for this project. And we are also going to, instead of writing the code and hoping that it will work, we will use TDD. So we will write a test case and then write the code and see that it works in real time. So I'm going to install Jest, which is a cool test runner, and the typings for it. And basically, I would need to configure Jest to use TypeScript. So as Craig did before, I'm going to copy paste from GitHub this configuration of the TypeScript Jest project. So right now I just installed TypeScript, TS query from phenom. Why did you choose this name, Craig? I have to type it each time when I install TS query.
Gotta make it tricky.
It is. And once it's finished installing, we'll write the test case that will be the input code that we want to refactor, and then how we want it to be refactored. So let's open Visual Studio Code. And first thing, we'll paste the Jest configuration in Pagination. So it isn't happy because I don't need this stuff. I copy pasted too much. Okay, let's open an src directory and create, let's call it console log refactor.spec.ts. So this is our test file, and let's also create console log.refactor.ts, which will be our actual code. And one thing I'm going to do is create a tsconfig file, just a configuration file for the TypeScript compiler. It's going to be empty. We are going to use the default configuration. And to make this really easy for us, I'm also going to use a tool called Wallaby. I don't know if you know it, but if you don't know, you should use it. It's basically a plugin for Visual Studio Code or also IntelliJ that runs your tests as you write your code. So you get your test coverage info as you run your code. So I'm going to start Wallaby. And
but Wallaby, unfortunately, is a paid service, I guess, right?
It's paid. I wouldn't say unfortunately, because the guy behind it, Artem, is amazing. And the fact that we pay for this tool is it makes it possible for him to dedicate his time working on it full time.
I agree. Good, fair point.
Yes, and it's also free for open source projects. So in our case, if I publish this project open source, it will be free for me. So just get your company to pay for it, or yeah, I'm not very good at writing and talking at the same time. So get your company to pay for it if you work on a paid product, or if you go work on something open source, then it shouldn't bother you. So here I have a very simple test case just to see that the setup is working. Expect 0 to be 0, and I can see I have one test passing. And the next thing I'm going to do is obviously make this test fail. So let me just think the indentation to spaces. Let's have some example. Let's say I have this input code, which would be class my Angular component. And this class will have some ng on init with console.log. This is a live demo. And I basically want to write this refactor function. Let's call it console.log refactor. And I want, whenever I run this function on the input, I want the output to be basically the same, but instead of console log, I want to see here this dot my awesome logging service dot log info. Let's fix the name of the test. And obviously right now my test fails because I still haven't implemented this function, but this is basically, actually I wanted to contain this text. This is basically what I wanted to do. I wanted to take this input and return this output. So let's create this function. We're using the tools we have just seen. So function. So this is the actual implementation, not the text case. And we have this source code of type string and just returning the source code. So the code compiles. We're going to import it. And now the code compiles, but we have this expectation fails because obviously we don't do anything yet. And the next thing we are going to do, we are going to import TS query from /TS query. And we are going to take this source code and turn it into AST. So there is this AST method inside TS query that converts source code to AST.
And that's it? I mean, that's it? I just say tsquery.ast and I have AST3, abstract syntax tree for my command?
Right, yes. I could actually console log it. I don't know, you can see this AST here. So this is another nice feature of Wallaby. As you write your code, if you have test coverage, you can write console log and see what the objects look like as you prototype your code. So yeah, we got the AST here with all those objects inside it. And the next thing we want to do is to create this query that will find these console logs. So I think we have.
So one more clarification. So this AST is the TypeScript implementation, right? So you use, I mean, it just forks from the TypeScript implementation, and on the top of that you have those queries, right? So I can also find this implementation in TypeScript, right?
Totally.
Right.
Okay.
Craig, perhaps you can comment on it while I'm writing the query to find these console logs.
Yeah, it's totally under the hood. It's literally just got a dependency on TypeScript, and we're just passing it through with some defaults. It's pretty straightforward. The only current limitation is that if you've got like a TSX file or something like that, so the TypeScript with the JSX syntax, it won't know how to pass that right now. But you can also just pass in a pre-generated AST. So we'll see how that next step works in a sec, I think, when you're passing it in to the query.
Thank you. So finally, I created a small AST query that search for call expressions that has this property access expression with the name with the expression the left side console and the right side is log. And let's say I even want to make it a little bit more sophisticated, and I want it just to work inside classes. So I don't want to replace console logs outside of classes, because obviously I want just to do it in my components. So all I have to do to make it match only console logs inside methods would be to add here method declaration. And now it's only working inside methods, inside class method, and not on just console logs wherever. So this is the query I came up with. And now let's see how we use it in code. So I have this AST, and now I'm going to have another array of matches, and I'm going to say tsQuery.query, because obviously I want to do a query, and I can pass the AST and the query, and basically this is it. I ran the query, I can print out the matches. Yeah, let's print the lengths, and we see we have one match because our test case has only one console log. And now for the final step that we need to do in order to refactor, once we found the match, we can simply replace the text of this match in the source code with a new text. So basically there are two ways to refactor. One is the simpler way, which works for the most part, and this is also what TSLint does. And I think the Angular CLI with many of the schematics, they also do it in the same way. Basically, I found the console log I was looking for. I will ask the AST where this console log begins, where it ends. I will take out this text and put a new text inside it. The other way would be to change the AST and then print this AST back to source code, which is also a good way for more complicated manipulations. But let's start with, let's show here the first one. So basically, I just copy the source code into result, and then I'm saying this thing, for const match of matches, I'm going over this matches array, and I'm going to say this. I'm going to take this result and take everything until the until the start of this match. So get start. So this will get me. Oh, it doesn't work. It should have printed the value of this. Okay, yes. You see, so this is the Wallaby printing me the value of this variable. So it's everything until the console log, everything that appeared before this console log, all this text. And then the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to put the new text that I want to be there instead of my console log. So in this case, it will be this.awesomeloggingservice.loginfo. So this is how I replace the console log with something new. And then I have to still copy the remaining part of my code. So I will take the substring from the source code from match.getEnd until the end of the file. Until the end of the string, and remove the unnecessary semicolons. And at this point, for some reason, the test is failing. Let's see why. Oh, obviously, I'm building the result, but I'm returning the original source code. So let's fix that. And now my test is green. It's passing. Yeah, thank you, Bartosz. So
that is, I mean, as usual, you astonish me, Uri, with all your crazy ideas, actually, that you put into life. Exactly, because you are the guy who has crazy ideas, but also at the same time, you put them into life. So this is really awesome.
Thank you. And just to give the credit, the reason this was so simple is this tsQuery.query, and this is Craig's work. And right now there is a proposal to create something called tsQuery.map that will even make this part of code obsolete. So you could even write this with just like 4 or 5 lines of code without all of this
I
code.
mean, that opens like the door for nice Visual Studio plugin, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I know your plans, guys. I can see it in your eyes.
Yes.
I will not say a word. I will not say a word, but I know that something is coming.
But just to point out a little danger in this thing, first of all, let's just make sure it works as intended. Let's add another console log at the end. And we expect this not to change the console log. And yeah, we can see indeed that the console log at the end remains as it is because it's not inside a class. But let's see what happens when we have another console log. This is line 2. We would expect this to change the other console log to this my awesome logging service dot whatever. But then we can see that the actual result was something very strange. Like the refactoring didn't go really well, as you can see. It created this dot blah, 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 and then at the middle of the string, you see some kind of mashup between the 2 lines. And can you guess the reason for this? So basically, what I'm doing over here, I take the first console log and replace it with different text. And after I replaced it, all the text after it changed.
Was already moved.
Right. So the offsets are no longer correct. So whenever we work with this method of doing replacements, we have to be careful and do it from the end to the start. Because if we are changing something on the end, we don't affect the offset that comes before it, only whatever comes after it. So in this case, the solution would be as simple as just calling reverse on the array. And now it's working correctly because now we are working from the end to the beginning. So if you are using this method of refactoring, just make sure you work from the end to the beginning and not the other way around. Otherwise, you have crazy stuff going. And of course, this will work even if we put a few new lines here.
I mean, it was not that obvious, Uri, that using reverse would work because, I mean, it took me a second to actually process this in my mind because, as you said, if I use reverse, so if I start from the bottom, I mean, so the indexes that are affected are the ones that I already changed, so I don't care about them.
Right, like if I take this, let's do it manually to show it. Let me just delete all this code and let's copy this example here. So if I take this piece of code and start changing it, so if my first change would be this one, this console log, then as soon as I changed it, I moved everything that comes after it forward, right?
Yes, exactly.
But if I change the second one, then everything that comes before it hasn't changed, hasn't moved. So if I work my way backward, I actually do it correctly because whenever I cut something, I know that everything after it has already been updated. So there is no worry in pushing it even further. So basically, this is one thing you should keep in mind if you are doing this search and replace stuff. I put this code on GitHub, so if you wanted, I will post the link and you can just try to run the exact same setup on your project and see how it replaces all console logs with this my awesome logging service .loginfo, and then you have to create the awesome logging service if you do this. And if we have a time for another short demo, then I would love
how about you, Craig? Because you just posted.
Right.
You have to run to the office.
I've got to go to work.
Yeah.
What's that?
So guys, if you don't mind, we can have another session with this cool stuff that we actually talked about, and let Craig not piece off the team because maybe he had some meeting and they could be waiting for him.
Sounds cool. So Craig, how about summarizing what we had today?
All right, so what we had today is we talked a bit about schematics. We talked about how you can use them to build up a boilerplate for an application using the ones that come for free with the Angular CLI and with Angular Material. We talked a bit about how you can make your own ones of those and how you can combine them. We talked a bit about ASTs and the underlying kind of techniques that you can use to build queries using tsquery over an AST. And then we looked through and saw how to use that and refactor your code a little bit. I think that was most of it. It was pretty cool.
Cool. I mean, it was actually a blast. I mean, I believe that our audience was also happy with the content, and there are yet to come more episodes. I hope that you guys would be my guest one more time to continue what we are actually discussing today. So for everybody, be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel, because from that point we will be streaming every webinar to YouTube. So even if you didn't actually subscribe and register for the webinar, you would have also you would have a chance to catch us Angular Academy show on YouTube stream. So if you follow my Twitter, I will edit this video later to show you the Twitter handle and the URL and the URL for YouTube channels, so you could actually always be on updated. So thank you, Craig. Thank you, Uri. Thank you, guys. See you next time.
Thank you. Don't fear the AST. Use it.
Yeah, AST for the win. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.